Modern grains versus ancient grains. We need to have a little chat about this because there's just a lot of information out there that's a bit crazy, and I still get questions about it on a regular basis. So, we're going to chat about that today. And welcome back to Grains and Grit Unsifted podcast. This is the extension of the Grains and Grit YouTube channel. This is the podcast where it is unedited, unfiltered, and well, it's unsifted. So, hopefully, you enjoy this more casual type of medium, I guess you could say. And you can either view on YouTube or you can just listen to it because it's a podcast and meant to be a bit more audio. Okay, so we are going to be talking about modern grains versus ancient grains. Which one is better, if any? And the answer kind of may surprise you, but I'm also going to be going through things that you need to be thinking about when you are making your decision when it comes to grains. Now, before we begin, this video is sponsored by Four Generations Organic Farms. They are an organic farm here in the United States. I love them. They are my go-to source for my hard red and hard white wheat berries at the moment. Be sure to check them out, grainsandgrit.com/4generations, coupon code grainsandgrit for 10% off your first order. And we will be talking more about them later because they are very much a part of this debate, this conversation of ancient versus modern wheats. Okay, so you may have heard ancient grains are better for us, that our modern wheat varieties are making us sick. They're unhealthy. They have been genetically modified. They, whatever, are the bane of the existence and causing all of the problems with everything and everyone. And there's a lot of misinformation about this. So, first of all, we're going to be discussing what exactly are ancient grains compared to our modern grains, like what makes it, a modern type grain. Do know that we are going to be focused on the wheat family because that's where most of the debate is. There are grains out there like corn, quinoa, amaranth that are ancient grains, but everyone ignores them pretty much. They're not in the wheat family per se. So whenever I'm talking about this, we are focusing on the wheat kind. What are you using to be baking breads? Your typical bread. And again, that's where the debate is. So what is the difference? What's an ancient grain versus the modern grain? What are modern grains? And but most of all, what is the main takeaway that you need to remember whenever it comes to ancient versus modern grains? And if you've watched my channel long enough, you probably know what I'm going to say, but stick around. Stick around. So, first of all, your ancient grain varieties are considered to be like your einkorn, your emmer, your spelt, your kamut, wheat durum, rye. It's those grains that have been around for a very long time. Einkorn is considered the first original domesticated wheat variety. If you want to know more about these specific wheat, I have many videos out there. If you go to like my Meet the Grain series, it's a playlist on YouTube, and I dive into an individual grain to give you even more history, more in depth about them. But bottom line is, those are considered our ancient grains. Our modern grains are considered to be ones like hard red, hard white, soft white wheat. They are the most grown grains, way easier to find, and way more popular. And the reason why is because basically our modern dwarf type wheat varieties were developed back pretty much in the 1950s. It was a collaboration with Mexico, the United States, and other countries where they really wanted to develop, they kind of wanted to solve starvation, hunger problems around the world. And so they wanted to see, can we develop wheat, because let's face it, wheat is king in the grain world. So many beneficial nutrients, and if we can give grains to people to, and grow that, and they're able to grow that, then they're able to ward off starvation and better feed their own families and their nation. But the problem is wheat cannot be grown everywhere. And so they were really coming together to see, can we develop wheat that is more consistent when grown, possibly more drought resistant, better yields, so on and so forth. And so this was a huge scientific endeavor, and it took years. I believe it was like 15, 20 years. And then from that basically came our modern wheat varieties. They're still And even with that, there are varieties upon varieties. Four Generations Organic Farms actually has, they are doing that. They still have, they have modern varieties that were not even the original type modern varieties. So that's the thing. But bottom line is, so that's considered more of our modern wheats, and with that, they are shorter. They're not the really, really tall amber waves of grain that you hear about. And the reason is that's more popular because if it gets too tall, if you have this skinny little stalk growing and then you have these heavy grains on it, they eventually start falling over. You could lose grains. It makes it a bit more difficult to grow and harvest. And so that's why these modern wheat varieties have definitely taken off because they're easier to grow. They do have better yields and they make really good breads. Okay, they do. They are easier wheats to work with as far as bakers go. Okay, so that's a very, 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 very brief, very brief history with that. And I can't remember if I said that they are a bit more drought resistant as well. So that's a big factor. So they are able to be grown in other places where your typical, like your ancient grains, may have had difficulty growing. So that's the very brief history of of wheat. And the bottom line that I want you to take away is when it comes to our modern wheat varieties, they're just hybrids. Okay, that's it. They were a very, very well studied and focused hybrid, but these are not genetically modified grains. These scientists went in and they studied, like humans have been doing for thousands of years. We have even the ancient grains are hybrids with hybrids because farmers realize, you know what, I like that trait of that plant and I like that trait of that wheat plant, and let's breed them together. They cross pollinate, and to produce better offspring that you get a better yield. It's easier to harvest, whatever the case may be. Farmers have naturally been doing this for thousands of years. And hybridization is a way that is something that God designed so plants and animals are able to adapt and survive. Okay? Hybridization is completely normal. I can take spelt, kamut, einkorn, and I can take hard red and hard white wheat berries. I can combine them all together. I can go plant them in a field right now, and they're going to naturally on their own cross pollinate, and I'm going to get a different type of wheat plant. But you know what, y'all? It's still wheat. Okay? It is doing exactly what God designed it to do. Hybridization is totally normal and something that God created and is not to be feared. So, with that being said, enter in Four Generations Organic Farms because they do grow the modern wheat varieties, but they actually partner up with the University of Oklahoma. They're pretty close because they are an Oklahoma farm, and I think they're only about an hour west of Oklahoma City, which is where the university is. And they know people there who have, and they develop these wheat varieties. Again, when I say developed, I'm not saying that they are genetically manipulating wheat. They're not inserting spider DNA or some sort of bacteria or something that God did not design it to be there. They're just studying these wheat varieties. They're breeding wheat to wheat, wheat to wheat, wheat to wheat to get a better child, basically. And Four Generations has actually taken some of this to grow it. So one of their wheats, Butler's Gold, fascinating story. Absolutely incredible wheat. My favorite hard red wheat variety. So consistent and wonderful for bakers at home. But it was a developed wheat variety from the University of Oklahoma, developed specifically for organic farmers because they are an organic farm, and so this is something that's a bit easier for organic farmers to grow because again they're not using all those pesticides and stuff like that that conventional farmers are allowed to use. They're not allowed to use them. And on top of that, this particular wheat variety, it was called Butler's Gold because named after a very famous um, he would have been a gold medalist back in the 1980s, but the Olympics were canceled, Cold War fiasco, so on and so forth. But it's his name was James Butler, and he was a sprinter. And they called this Butler's Gold because this wheat can be planted later, but it grows fast and it kind of sprints to the finish line to be able to grow. And I thought that was really cool. And that might, and I know people will take that and say, see, this has been manipulated where it's not growing for as long of a period of time and, it's shorter and all that stuff. But y'all, it's still wheat. Okay. And what's most important, there are two things when it comes to choosing your wheat, two things that are the most important that you need to consider. One, how is it grown? Okay, whether it is ancient varieties or these modern wheat varieties, are they using chemicals that you are not wanting to ingest? Are they spraying with glyphosate, which I've done a video about that before? Believe it or not as many wheat varieties in the United States. Most wheat is not sprayed with glyphosate, but that's another issue. It is something that you do need to consider. Do they use glyphosate? Are they using, pesticides that you may not want on your food? Are they taking care of their soil? Okay. Nutrients begin in the soil. Healthy soil means those plants are getting nutrients from the soil, and your plants are going to be more nutritious. This is why most people are like magnesium deficient, because our soil has been so stripped of very important nutrients like magnesium that even though you could be like eating organic fruits and vegetables, that soil is deficient in magnesium, which is why many of us may need to take a magnesium supplement. Another story there. But that's one thing that you need to consider is, how do they take care of their soil? That is one thing that Four Generations does, is they do regenerative farming practices. I can never say that word, where what that means is they're really taking care of their soil to build up the soil health for each generation, for each crop after that, to be even better. I actually saw where the Four Generations had recently bought, because I have been to their farm. I can't remember if I mentioned that. I have actually seen the wheat in their fields. I've seen how they work, their operations, all of that stuff, and I love it. I love it. I love it. But I'd actually seen recently, he pointed out a field that he had recently bought, and it was like not in good condition. But he mentioned how he was going to just grow oats there. He's not selling it or anything. I think he said, if I remember right, growing oats, tilling it back into the ground, because oats contain very excellent nutrients. I cannot remember what, that really help and feed wheat whenever they can go in and grow wheat. And so they're doing these things to purposely, instead of just going out and buying chemicals, the fertilizer and just dumping it in, they're actually taking care of the soil and building up that soil health. And that's something you need to consider whenever, whether it's ancient grains or modern grains. How's the health of the soil of whatever the source that you're buying? Now, I will say most organic farmers, most of them are using those regenerative farming practices. That's kind of one thing you want to look for, is regenerative farming practices, because the point of that is they're trying to build up their soil health. And again, that doesn't matter if they're planting ancient wheat, modern wheat, tomatoes, fruit, oats, whatever. It doesn't matter what you grow because what matters is that soil, and then whatever you grow from that is going to be more nutritious. And so that's one thing to consider. Ancient, modern wheat varieties. What really matters is how it was grown. That's really going to help you when it comes to nutrition. And the second big, huge mondo thing, you probably know it's coming if you follow me. It's not the grain, it's the flour. It's not the grain, it's the flour. Say it with me, y'all. It's not the grain, it's the flour that has been messed with. Because where many people like Wheat Belly and Grain Brain and all of these anti-grain people, they throw out the baby with the bathwater. Because what happened is, it's not like our wheat has become more poisonous or less nutritious, or it has so much gluten in it now, it's messing with us all. No, what happened was, now this also happened to coincide when these modern dwarf varieties were becoming more popular, was white flour came out and was available for the masses. Now that happened around like the 1920s. Our modern wheat varieties then became really popular like the 1950s, 1960s, and so on. Okay. They are the most popular wheat that is grown. Your hard red, hard white, soft white, these modern wheat varieties, they are the most popular grown. They are not the problem. It's the flour, the white flour that has been stripped of its nutrients. And fun fact, Four Generations Organic Farms is a supplier to King Arthur flour. So their same wheat berries are going to King Arthur flour. But there's a huge difference when you buy that wheat from King Arthur flour and you buy the flour from King Arthur flour compared to taking Four Generations wheat berries and milling them at home yourself. Because when you take wheat berries and you mill them at home yourself, you are getting all the beneficial nutrients, the vitamin E, the fiber, all of the B vitamins, all of the nutrients. And on top of that, whatever nutrients they have been able to get from the soil. So higher magnesium and copper and zinc and those type of nutrients, which starts in the soil, you're getting all that when you mill the wheat berries at home. So I can take those same wheat berries, but if I take Four Generations wheat berries and then I create white flour, those wheat berries suddenly became less nutritious, even though they were grown the same. The difference is whenever I mill them at home. I hope this makes sense to y'all. And that's the biggest thing I want you to take away is what matters the most is that you, whether it's ancient grains or modern grains, that you are milling it yourself, that you're milling these grains yourself, consuming that 100% freshly milled whole grain flour the way that God designed us to have it, not white flour, not bread from the store made from said white flour and then has additional gluten and preservatives added to that. Again, I could take the same wheat berries from Four Generations, make white flour and make the bread and add the preservatives, and you're gonna react. You can possibly react differently to it, even though it's wheat. But that's the difference that makes. And so I really hope that this makes sense. So again, whether it's ancient wheat or modern wheat, check with your farmer. See if they're really taking care of their soil so you're getting the maximum amount of nutrients in your wheat berries, and then mill it at home yourself, y'all. Consume 100% freshly milled whole grain flour. And again, I love Four Generations Organic Farms, their Butler's Gold and their Stardust is their hard white wheat. Those are my go-to. I use them every day, all the time in my house because they are so consistent and they're wonderful. And I do recommend for you newbies to milling, start with your modern grains because they are easier to work with. Your ancient grains, especially when you mill them yourself, they can be trickier to work with. You can do it, but you're going to find that they just act differently because they are different. The gluten structure is a bit different. They're still great. I'm not knocking them. I love my ancient grains. I use them. I love them, but I don't really recommend them for newbies because the modern ones are easier to work with. Another thing is, in full disclosure, I will say I do still receive comments on my YouTube channel from people saying, I've been milling my grains using hard red or hard white or whatever, and I still have issues. I switched to milling ancient grains and I no longer have the digestive issues. And if that is you, keep doing your thing. So long as you're milling the wheat yourself, if it's working for you, stick with it because you're still consuming a good whole grain, whether it's ancient or modern wheat variety. But I will say, I do encourage you to not give up the modern wheats entirely because it's possible that maybe you need some healing in your gut. Maybe you need that healing, and the more there is a different structure with those ancient grains that are modern grains, not unnatural. Again, it's not genetically manipulated or anything like that. Um, we've just bred traits that we like and works the best for bread baking and so on and so forth. But I encourage you, like, maybe give it a year whenever you're consuming freshly milled wheat on a regular basis, healing your gut, and then maybe try those modern wheats again, see how it is. Unfortunately, you do have to treat yourself as a guinea pig. But bottom line, if you just absolutely want to avoid these modern wheats, but you're milling the ancient grains yourself, totally fine. Totally fine. You're still receiving so many, all the good health benefits. All the health benefits of all the wheat varieties are the same. Okay, they're pretty much the same. They may minor a little bit. Okay, like hard red wheat has a little bit more fiber than, say, soft white wheat. But bottom line is you're still getting so many great benefits no matter which wheat that you're using, so long as you're milling it yourself. So hopefully this makes sense, y'all. And I just really wanted to clarify these are things that kind of it frustrates me in a way because people think our modern wheats are so bad and terrible. But it really just comes down to, the soil that's grown in, making sure you get a farmer that really knows how to take care of it. I do recommend organic grains, always just to be on the safe side. And of course, milling the wheat yourself. Okay. Mill it yourself. But and I do recommend checking out Four Generations Organic Farms. Again, grainsandgrit.com/four generations. Code Grains and Grit for 10% off your first order. Because if you haven't checked them out, I'm telling you, y'all, I'm telling you, they are excellent, excellent wheat berries. They taste amazing, really easy to work with, especially even though you're milling them yourself and you do want to check them out. So let me know in the comments below. Let me know your experience with ancient grains, modern wheats. Do you notice a difference? Is the difference for you, so long as you're milling it, it doesn't matter which wheat you're using? I really would like to hear your opinion. Feel free to comment below. And as always, I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.